Coming up, Michael Cohen is back on the stand testifying in the Trump criminal trial about why he lied to the former president. For the former president, our legal correspondent has the latest. President Biden announces new tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles and electronics. How will this affect the EV industry? We'll have an economist break it down for you. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a surprise visit to Ukraine today. What he talked about while there and the promises he made to Ukraine. An early morning bus ride to work turns deadly for 8 people in Florida and injures dozens more. Police are on the scene to figure out what happened. An anti-abortion activist is sentenced to federal prison today. We'll tell you more about the sentence and what the judge is saying about her actions. Some of the best groomed dogs there are gathering in New York City to compete in the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. We'll show you the highlights of the competition. Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. Former President Trump's one-time personal attorney is back on the stand for a second day of testimony. Michael Cohen testified earlier today that Trump signed false invoices that Cohen sent him in 2017. He said he wrote a retainer agreement, but they were actually for reimbursement of the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, plus a bonus. He also said he lied to the Federal Election Commission. We turn now to our legal correspondent, Arlene Richards, at the courthouse. Arlene, the defense is planning to go after Cohen for being a convicted liar to show the jury that he's not a credible witness. How is the prosecution preparing the jury before the defense cross-examines Cohen?
Well, the prosecution is helping Cohen to paint himself as a loyal and trusted attorney for Trump. They're getting ahead of the defense by asking him about the federal crimes that he was convicted of. Now, Cohen said that his family encouraged him to stop being loyal to Trump. And as a result of that, he pleaded guilty to those federal crimes. He also talked about testifying before Congress and apologizing to them, the country, and his family for making that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels. Now, all of this helps to show the jury that he has remorse for what he has done and he's paid its dues. And it also helps to soften the blow that's expected to come from the defense.
So another part of the defense's strategy to discredit Michael Cohen seems to be a focus on Cohen's obsession with Trump. How is the prosecution handling that strategy?
Well, the prosecution is directly asking Cohen about his podcast and the books that he's written. Now, Cohen admits that he talks a lot about Trump in his podcast, and he also features Trump in those books. But he says that, this was done because he had so many experiences with Trump. Now, the defense is going to try and point out what he exactly says in that podcast and how he attacks Trump a lot. And they're also going to get into how much money he's making from these ventures. But this is helping the prosecution to show the jury that, he has remorse for what he's did. And again, it's getting ahead of the prosecution before they have a chance to attack Cohen on cross-examination. Back to you.
All right. Thanks for the updates, Arlene. And while Michael Cohen is testifying, Trump's allies outside the courthouse came to his defense.
They are doing this intentionally to keep him here and keep him off of the campaign trail. I am disgusted by what is happening here. The president's actions in this matter were previously reviewed and no charges were filed. Why is that? Because there's no crime here. Now, 8 years later, suddenly they've resurrected this thing. They brought it back. And why is that? Well, just apply common sense, everyone can see. It's painfully obvious that we're now 6 months out from an election day.
Trump and his allies say the case is a partisan attempt to interfere with his re-election campaign. They point to one of the prosecutor's key witnesses, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. He's been antagonizing Trump outside the courtroom, but a gag order keeps Trump from responding in kind.
Our justice system should be blind to politics, that regardless of whether your last name is Biden or Trump, regardless of whether you've been a politician or not, you get a fair shake in our own legal system. And when you have a prosecutor who campaign on the pledge of going after Trump and then keeps his campaign pledge, when you have a judge whose kids are collecting money from Democratic operatives by fundraising off the very trial that that judge is presiding over, and then telling the U.S. president that he's subject to a gag order, that he can't talk about it, that is not justice.
For a complete overview of Trump's New York trial today, stay tuned for the Capitol Report at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on NTD. Next up, the Biden administration announcing a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles today. That's up from about 25% right now. Plus, it's also raising tariffs on Chinese semiconductors, batteries, solar cells, steel, and aluminum.
I spent a lot of time with Xi Jinping. Early on, I told him, he said, why am I being unfair with China? Not unfair. I said, look, we'll play by the same rules if you want. If you want to do business in China, you got to have a 51% Chinese owner. You got to provide access to all your intellectual property, etc. You want to do that in America? With silence. Sometimes it's just outright steal through cyber espionage and other means.
The tariffs come in the middle of a heated campaign between Biden and Trump as both candidates are vying to show who's tougher on China. The director of the National Economic Council said the tariffs will help thwart Beijing's efforts to dominate the market for emerging technologies, which could pose risks to U.S. national security and economic stability. There are currently very few EVs from China in the U.S., but officials worry that low-priced models made possible by subsidies from the Chinese regime could soon start flooding the U.S. market. Senior officials said the new tariffs will not increase costs for U.S. customers, but didn't give specifics. For more on this, we go now to Vance Gin. He's the president of Gin Economic Consulting. Mr. Gin also served as chief economist for the White House Office of Management and Budget. Good to see you. To begin with, China handed out $29 billion in subsidies between 2009 and 2022. Those heavy subsidies have driven China's EV industry to overcapacity, and their prices are cheap too. For example, Chinese automaker BYD sells an electric car called the Seagull for around $12,000 in China. What impact does this have on the U.S. EV industry, or what impact could it have?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I think that there's a lot going on here whenever you look at the amount of subsidies, not only in China, but now the Biden administration has also been subsidizing EVs and the green energy agenda over the last few years. And this is another example of the Biden agenda has been failing. And so they're trying to look at every other tool in their belt in order to subsidize things or raise taxes on Americans, really, by importing these electric vehicles. And one thing to note here is electric vehicles are only about 2% of the imports or the EVs from China, because we primarily import a lot of those from Germany and other countries. So this is going to have a little influence on the electric vehicle market.
And next up, in the American EV market, what percentage of Chinese, so you said 2% it takes up right now. Even after the Biden administration increases the tariff to 100% on electric Chinese vehicles, their price will still be relatively affordable, as you just heard. You know, will this action really affect the people buying or trying to import Chinese electric vehicles?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because usually what you have is you have one entity, this being the United States, raising their tariff to 100%. But what will China do next? Will they raise their tariffs? Will they have a reciprocal trade form of trade war that goes on here? This is a tough situation because it usually goes back and forth. This is what we saw during the Trump administration, and now we're seeing this doubled down upon by the Biden administration. And I think this is going to hurt a lot of Americans in the process. I think it's also something that we need to take a step back from. Should the government be pushing us into electric vehicles, to a green energy agenda, when a lot of those parts, the minerals, the raw materials, are coming from places like China? Instead, we could be moving more toward a direction of new innovation and technology without this massive amount of regulation, government spending, and taxation, and instead reduce government involvement in these markets. And I think that will allow for more people to prosper in the process.
Yeah, the world really is dependent on China for a lot of those elements of the new technologies for sustainable technologies out there. But looking at the problem of overcapacity in China, does the United States have other solutions? You've suggested, that is besides raising tariffs, you've suggested that perhaps we shouldn't rely on these technologies at all. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is we shouldn't have the government propping one technology up over another. We should allow for the free market to work, for people to voluntarily exchange, and allow for prices to signal what should be produced and what should not, what consumers should be able to purchase and what should not, instead of forcing them into things like this, the electric vehicle, where a lot of the raw materials do not come from the United States. They come from other places like China. And so as many environmentalists, including those in the Biden administration, want to push us to this green energy agenda, the cost of that comes with us importing from other raw materials from other places like China. And this will increase the amount of government spending and likely higher taxes because we're already running $34 trillion in national debt. I just see this as a bad situation where the Biden administration is failing on their policy and they're looking at other ways to overcome it. And this is a bad situation in the process.
All right, Vance Gin, great to hear your insights. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
And today in Florida, 8 people are dead and 40 others critically injured when a bus carrying farm workers crashed. Police on the scene say the bus was sideswiped by a pickup truck around 6:30 this morning. According to the State Highway Patrol, the crash happened near an intersection in north central Florida. The bus was carrying 53 people when it collided with a Ford Ranger truck. The sideswipe caused the bus to crash through a fence and roll down an embankment. The workers were traveling to a farm about an hour north of Orlando. The road where the crash occurred remains closed as investigators determine the cause of the accident. And a woman who blocked off an abortion clinic in Washington, D.C. is headed to prison. Lauren Handy and several others were convicted of federal civil rights offenses for blocking access to the clinic in 2020. Investigators say Handy directed blockaders to link themselves together with locks and chains and block the doors of the facility. A co-defendant used social media to live stream the blockade. Police found 5 fetuses at Handy's home in Washington, D.C. after she was indicted. The judge in the case said she was sentencing Handy for her actions and not her beliefs. Prosecutors wanted a longer sentence, labeling Handy as an extremist and mastermind. And in related news, thousands of women who live in states with abortion restrictions are ordering abortion pills from other states. The results of a survey were released today that show 8,000 women a month were receiving the pills by mail. The research also found another 8,000 women in states without bans were receiving pills each month through virtual appointments. About 2,000 of those are in areas with local restrictions on telemedicine for abortions. The research was conducted for the Society of Family Planning, an organization that supports abortion access. Abortions using drugs typically involve a combination of 2 medications, mifepristone and misoprostol. And lawyers recently presented arguments in a case involving a University of Buffalo student group. Young Americans for Freedom says it's being targeted for its conservative views. NTD's Daniel Monahan speaks with an attorney from the group Alliance Defending Freedom. They say the case is part of a troubling trend and that the future of democracy itself is at stake.
Young Americans for Freedom says the campaign of the University of Buffalo Student Association to silence them began after it invited conservative speaker Michael Knowles to campus last year, which was met with a large protest. The group was de-recognized 2 weeks later, only to later be recognized again after it filed a lawsuit. The group says the Student Association then made a new rule that forces student organizations to sign away their legal rights and prohibits them from entering into any agreements on their own, for example, bringing speakers on campus. The group has refused to sign away their legal rights and says it's over $6,000 in activity fees is being kept from it until it submits. Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Logan Spina.
When the government has opened a forum, whether that's a physical forum where you come and talk, or whether it's like this one where it's access to benefits like the student activity fee funding, when it's done that, it can't put a bar on the door that says you have to surrender your constitution.
Voices across campuses, such as the violent protests and heckling encountered by former collegiate swimmer Riley Gaines, political commentator Charlie Kirk, or Judge Kyle Duncan at Stanford University. Spina says some people have lost an understanding of what rights are and where they come from.
So we're failing to recognize that rights come or something that we possess by virtue of being human beings, and that we possess those things equally, as opposed to simply a judgment by the state about what's expedient. And I think then that you're seeing that play out when it comes to students wanting to just simply protect speech that they think is valuable and take away speech that they think isn't.
The attorney says free speech can only work if it applies to everyone and discusses its important roles.
The pragmatic one is that you can't have a free system of government without free speech. You can't have the machinery of a republic that is truly operated by free people if people aren't able to speak to one another and to their elected representatives about matters of fundamental importance.
According to Spina, once the government begins tilting the scale on all of that dialogue, it's fundamentally undermining democracy.
The principled purpose of free speech is that it's something that free people simply ought to have, whether or not it's accomplishing something particularly valuable in the context of operating a Republican government or doing other good things. It's something that the government simply doesn't have authority, since the government is also just made up of other men. It doesn't have the authority to say what you can think or what you can say out loud, outside of some very specific enumerated exceptions.
NTD reached out to the University of Buffalo Student Association, but they did not wish to comment. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
When we come back, experts in France warn of escalating juvenile delinquency. This follows a recent Senate report detailing billion-dollar destruction during summer riots. And which talented pup will take home the title of Best in Show? Hopeful furry contestants are showing off their looks and skills today at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. That story after the break.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade small batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I received 2 stents in my arteries, stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. I have met so many survivors. Each of them tells a story that can be so helpful to women out there.
Everything was pretty good. It was a very happy life. I was given the diagnosis that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a pregnancy-induced heart failure. They told me my only chance was a heart transplant.
And the American Heart Association helped make that possible. Their research helped save me.
I think everyone should support the American Heart Association. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. You can be part of that very important work that the American Heart Association is doing to save lives everywhere. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives.
I'm grateful for just every day that I get with my children. I am very thankful for the American Heart Association.
Heart disease is America's #1 killer, and your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives.
Life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Prediabetes does. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test today. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org.
The latest figures from France's Minister of the Interior shows a sharp increase in violence last year. French media outlets and private citizens alike now say their cities are going wild, and they want more action from the government. NTD's France correspondent David Vives has the details.
Official crime figures for 2023 reveal a rise in violent acts in France, including assaults, sexual offenses, and homicides. Overall recorded violence surged by 7%, according to the Minister of Interior, who says in April, juvenile delinquency is more violent than ever before. For example, a recent inquiry from the Senate reported that during the summer of 2023, the destruction during the riots in French suburbs and big cities cost around $1 billion, with 2,500 buildings attacked and around 12,000 vehicles destroyed. Some French say there's a lack of response and actions from French authorities to the delinquency.
Yes, there is a feeling of impunity from delinquents. There are many penalties that could be applied to them, to young people who commit offenses, but they are rarely punished by the law. Maybe they have the excuse of being minors, which I think should be reviewed.
Last year, French President Emmanuel Macron said during a meeting with ministers that the violence in the country shows that a process of decivilization is in progress. Other terms are used by media outlets to describe the phenomenon, such as society turning wild.
There's a lot of impunity, and what's more, there's no structure in place to welcome these young people. The society is becoming wild. It really feels like an injustice. This is as true for the people whose property has been damaged as it is for the victims of young delinquents. That's the level. You get the impression that all you hear is bad news. There's a feeling of fear that's perhaps also exacerbated by the media. Or every day we hear these rather sordid stories in media outlets.
According to database Numbeo, France has the second highest crime index of criminality in Europe in 2023 after Belarus. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And in a move signaling the potential for future bankruptcy, Red Lobster shuttered 50 of its locations across the United States, leaving workers and customers in shock. The closures come as Red Lobster considers filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The chain has about 650 restaurants across the U.S. Restaurant equipment at the shuttered locations will go up for auction. The auctions for each of the closed restaurants are winners take all. And the U.S. small businesses are more confident about the economy, and President Biden bans Russian uranium imports. NTD's Don Ma has those stories in today's Business Matters.
Okay, thank you, Steph. To start off, U.S. small business confidence increased in April, but persistent labor shortages continue to exert cost pressures for owners. This is according to a new survey by the National Federation of Independent Business. So previously, the index had slumped to the lowest level since December 2012, and that means small business owners are really pessimistic about the U.S. economy. But despite this April's rebound, it was still the 28th straight month that the index was below the organization's 50-year average. So 22% of owners reported that inflation was their single most important problem in operating their business. Cost pressures remain the top issue for small business owners, including historically high levels of owners raising compensation to keep employees and attract them. The NFIB reported last week that 40% of owners reported job openings they could not fill in April. And speaking of inflation, U.S. producer prices also came in today, increased more than expected in April, and this is amid strong increases in the cost of services and goods, which, by the way, is indicating that inflation remained elevated early in the second quarter. The producer price index for final demand rose 0.5% last month. This is according to the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics. Meanwhile, today, President Joe Biden signed into law a ban on Russian-enriched uranium. So this is according to the White House. And this is the latest effort by Washington to try to disrupt President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Now, The ban on imports of the fuel for nuclear power plants begins in about 90 days, although it allows the Department of Energy to issue waivers in case of supply concerns. Russia is the world's top supplier of enriched uranium, and about 24% of the enriched uranium used by U.S. nuclear power plants come from the country. All right, that's all from me, Steph. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Don. And now, news of some furry friends. The finest dogs around have gathered to compete at the 148th annual Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show in New York. NTD's Fiona G has more.
Battling it out in a breed. And Louis.
6-year-old Afghan hound Louis won the hound group as his silky locks flowed in the wind. Vivacious Shih Tzu Comet was small but mighty. He won the toy group with his luscious fur-do. In the herding group, 4-year-old German Shepherd Mercedes dominated the field with her energy and coordination, setting her apart from over 30 furry competitors. In the non-sporting group, miniature poodle Sage was every inch the lady, winning first place with her perfectly fluffed look. Each winning pup displayed their breed's unique qualities and the deep connection between man and man's best friend. The competition continues today with the best in the sporting, working, and terrier groups. Young handlers between 9 and 18 years old can compete in the junior showmanship finals. The winner of the prestigious Best in Show award will be announced tonight. But no victory tastes quite as sweet as a yummy treat. Fiona G, NTD News.
All right, some very well-groomed dogs there. Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m.